So
Hello,
my name,
welcome to our new interview from the Cloud Report. I'm Friederike, and today I'm joined by Julian from Cloudical and Chris from HashiCorp. Chris, please introduce yourself.
yeah, thank you. My name is Kent. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at HashiCorp and really align on our secure product line. So that really kind of factors into Vault, Boundary, and kind of some other things. I will share out here. And so for today, we're really going to be kind of talking about two kind of primary areas, really about product announcements that we made a little over a month ago, as well as the idea around zero trust and multi-cloud.
Great.
So when we talk about really the idea of security in the cloud and how we're kind of securing this move over, it's really around the idea of delivering application workloads consistently in the cloud, and it kind of extends across these four platforms of uh, infrastructure provisioning, security, networking connectivity, as well as runtime. And as you can see here, we really have kind of four primary products within the enterprise world for Vault, or sorry, for HashiCorp, that align to these kind of different areas. And we're going to be specifically talking about the security aspect in Vault today. And oftentimes when we talk about this kind of like securing cloud and this move to cloud, we talk about this shift from static to dynamic. And so really what this is this, it's a shift really from kind of like the traditional way of doing security. So securing, four walls of a data center, really protecting kind of like a single point of ingress and egress. And this really starts to shift as people move into this more of a dynamic world where it's multiple clouds, it's on-prem, it's private clouds. And this migration to cloud really kind of takes into consideration that, like in the static world, you had to protect networks, firewalls, IP-based perimeter and security, HSM, SIMs, as well as protect physical access and restrictions. And a lot of this starts to fade away when we start to move into this dynamic world. So the need for dynamic access and networking, identity-based security, as well as software-defined access and controls. And so you've heard of this term zero trust, but what does it really mean? And in the multi-cloud security world, a zero trust world really kind of takes into consideration these four primary pillars. So machine authentication and authorization, machine-to-machine access, human-to-machine access, as well as human authentication and authorization. We'll kind of talk about all of these a little bit. And so really these four primitives are based around this idea of trust nothing and authenticate and authorize everything. So the idea that no matter what people are doing, no matter what machines are doing, anywhere in your infrastructure or landscape, that everything is authenticating and authorizing every time to really have the best security posture. When we talk about machine authentication and authorization, we introduced Vault in 2015 as a solution for a way to tightly control and secure access to secrets, as well as protecting data in these kind of different worlds. The Vault approach has always been this idea of clients, whether it's human or machines, have to always authenticate based on a trusted form of identity. So this could be an identity platform, it could be app roles, certificates, anything of that nature. Once those things are authenticated, then there are policies that are attached, or what are they authorized to do? So how long can they access secrets? Can they decrypt data? Can they encrypt data? What can they really access, and how can they do these kind of different operations? And we've seen a lot of adoption for Vault, which has been incredible. Over the last year, we've seen over 600,000 downloads of the Vault and Kubernetes integration. We've seen close to 16 million downloads of Vault open source, as well as trillions of secrets served each year across our open source and enterprise offerings, as well as 70% of the top 20 US banks now use Vault Enterprise. And so what we were hearing from customers was really around this idea of like, hey, like adopting Vault has been foundational. However, we don't really have the operational expertise, or it takes too long for teams to get up and running. And so really it was this around this idea that, customers were looking for different ways to consume our products. And so in June of this last year, we introduced the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. Uh, it, and we kind of announced the HCL. And really, it was around this idea about bringing our products into a more consumable format. And so the HashiCorp Cloud Platform vision is really around the idea of push-button deployment, fully managed infrastructure, as well as one multi-cloud workflow. So this last month at HashiConf US, we announced the private beta for HCP Vault, which was really exciting. And what it brings customers and users the ability to have push-button deployment of Vault clusters in the cloud. And this really enables them to have a fully managed Vault cluster so that they're increasing their productivity and reducing costs by removing or abstracting away the complexity and the operational burden, and really allowing HashiCorp to manage that for them. As well as it provides this kind of one multi-cloud workflow. So the idea being that they have visibility into Vault clusters wherever they might be, kind of through a single pane of glass through this kind of workflow within the HashiCorp Cloud Platform. And the value pillars really around the HashiCorp Cloud Platform are really aligned around faster cloud adoption, increased productivity, and multi-cloud flexibility, excuse me. And so again, we were really excited to announce at HashiConf the private beta. So this is available for any users that want to go sign up and get started there. So then when we kind of realign and kind of take a step back into this kind of view of the identity-driven controls, then we start to look at so how do we secure machine-to-machine access? And like I mentioned earlier, in June, we announced the HCP console on the cloud platform. At HashiConf, we also announced the public beta. But really what HCP console allows is it allows this idea, or provides users with the idea of securing service-to-service discovery, service-to-service communication, as well as automating your network infrastructure. So whether you're trying to secure services across clouds, you're trying to secure networking across these kind of different environments, you can automate all of that through console. So you're really kind of honing back in on this machine-to-machine access story. So then we kind of shift away from the machine side of the story into more of like the human or the user side. So then we focus on human authentication and authorization. And this is really where we talk about establishing user identity. And traditionally it was around in that kind of the four walls where you controlled everything. You had all the racks within the data center, and you really knew who was in there. It was really around the idea that you could just still have a username and password, or just credentials that you distribute and store. But this has started to shift away when customers or users were moving into this more of a private data center single sign-on model. And this is where you start to see the adoption of things like Active Directory, LDAP or Open LDAP. And it still kind of keeps migrating into a more distributed way where you start to move into this cloud and single sign-on environments. And this is where you start to see identity platforms like Okta, Ping, ADFS, and so on. And so really it's the idea of leveraging these sources of truth from companies that they already kind of align on within their organization. So then, when we say that, when we look at okay, so single sign-on is really like the trusted way and that everyone's kind of aligned on in terms of how their organizations or even how users are going to kind of authenticate who they are. Then we start to talk about how do we secure what people are doing with machines. So whether they're trying to get on VMs or these different environments. And so the traditional workflow for access is really around the idea of a user goes and requests access to a system, and then they connect, then they're issued, VPN credentials, SSH keys, IP addresses, then credentials for the actual application. They then go and connect to these kind of the VPN or the SSH bastion, which then kind of puts them on the network, and then they have to navigate through the firewall with the IP address for the application. Once they get there to the application, then they have to provide the credentials to the application and get started. What this does is it makes onboarding users into this workflow really difficult because it's really hard to scale. So, you're talking about, people coming and going within an organization. How do you manage these things across this entire environment? You then have, the users on the network, so they have access to potentially other systems that are on the same network as well. Managing access based on IPs for these applications is incredibly brittle, especially at scale in these different kind of dynamic and ephemeral environments. And then as well, you're exposing the credentials out to the user for this application, which creates another kind of touch point where this could, have a breach or some kind of nefarious activity. So when we talk about the idea of this shift from static to dynamic, then there's also this idea of maybe a different workflow for accessing all your kind of different environments in this dynamic world. And so the idea becomes, in this dynamic workflow, that the user logs in with their trusted identity, so their single sign-on or whatever it might be. They're then authorized based on roles and services of what they can connect to and what they have access to. They then select a host or service from their catalog that they have available to them, and then they connect automatically. Onboarding in this manner is incredibly easy because, again, you're leveraging the identity platform, so you're not necessarily doing any additional steps. The configuration is stable because you're doing authorization, again, based on these kind of roles and services versus doing everything on an individual level. The network in this kind of workflow remains private, so you're not exposing out the network to users on the end, as well as you're not having credentials exposed to the users. So you're connecting through an automatic process. So at HashiCorp, like I said, a little over a month ago, we introduced HashiCorp Boundary. And I'll kind of walk through a little bit of what Boundary is, and feel free to stop me at any point here. But really what Boundary is the idea of, it's like a simple and secure remote access. So the idea being that a user would authenticate with their identity provider. They're then authorized within their available hosts and services that are kind of either they've configured or an administrator or operator is configured for them that they can access. And then they select the service or the host that they want to connect to, and it's automatically connected to them. And this workflow is really around the idea of automating this kind of end-to-end user experience and really focusing on what their experience is like. So you abstract away all this complexity, as well as introduce a lot more security around how people are connecting to these kind of remote services and hosts. And so really the goals around why we introduced Boundary was the idea of on-demand access, dynamic environments, easy to use and open source. So really the idea around on-demand access is being able to access all of the things that you maybe have in your service catalog, your different hosts and services available to you, really by being able to just securely access them without having to store credentials, network addresses, IPs, and just log in with your trusted identity and have everything available to you kind of in an instant access kind of way. From a dynamic environment standpoint, it's really around like eliminate the complexity and time spent like managing access to these kind of different and ephemeral and dynamic environments. So whether you're talking about applications, Kubernetes clusters and pods, different clouds, either public, private, the routing, the information that you need to access all these things becomes pretty complex when you start to have a diverse landscape. So the idea around Boundaries, it simplifies all this and puts it into kind of an easy to consume, kind of almost like a service catalog. And then easy to use, we really wanted to focus on the user here because there's a lot of focus in kind of the access management space around the secure part of it. And that's something that we wanted to enhance, but we also really wanted to enhance the user experience. So the idea of bringing a platform agnostic way to access applications and hosts across clouds, Kubernetes clusters, on-prem data centers, all through an automated workflow that works with existing tooling. And then open source, this is something that's near and dear to us. We wanted to bring this solution to the world in an open source capacity, given that that's kind of where our products are based out of. And so really the idea around like the workflow is the idea of identity-based access and controls, automated access workflow, as well as session management and auditability. So the idea being here on the UI that you see is, the things that you've configured that you can connect to are available here. You simply click on one of them and get started.
So is this then changed? So as the identity management provider now, is this the idea behind the boundary, or is this just an intermediary against the identity providers, and you are managing them in one place in between?
Yeah, so great question. So the way that Boundary, or I should maybe even say Boundary, the way that like the security line within HashiCorp works, because the Vault does this as well, is we actually leverage the identity on your behalf. So think of Vault and Boundary as like they broker the identity. So whether it's, Okta, Active Directory, LDAP, whatever it might be, and this is how it's worked in Vault for years, is that you would log in with your, whatever your identity is, and then that is tied in within the Boundary and within Vault, and even within part of Console, so that really anything that you do is based on that identity. Within Vault, for example, there is a full identity kind of framework, so that if you have, let's say you have an Active Directory identity, you have a AWS IAM, GCP IAM, and maybe GitHub. Within the Vault identity model is that you could, so you could create like, your own entity. So like you have, these different pieces, so that Vault looks at all those ones we talked about. So Active Directory, GitHub, etc. It still looks at that as you, like you are the one unit, no matter if you're logging into these different ones. So there's different ways of how it's handled and interpreted. But yeah, we completely leverage the identity model. We don't replace it or anything. Okay. And this has been kind of a perspective of ours for a while. Like we want to integrate with your existing tooling rather than having to force you to replace it.
Yeah, I see. So you are not reinventing the wheel there. The other question that I'm wondering is how is actually differ. So you had these four pillars coming from machine authentication, authorization, going to machine access, human to machine access, and human authentication. So how do they really differ from one each other? So where do they really, is this, are different, do they do really different tasks, or are they actually in one? Machine to machine access, for example, how is this done based on what technology is behind there?
Yeah, great question. So to achieve these kind of three different things, there are three different binaries, three different products. However, there is a lot of cross-product integration. So for example, you asked about the machine-to-machine, like how does it do it? So Console, for example, it will use like a TLS. So like it will like kind of author certificates for all the different hosts and services that it's going to secure. It can use Vault as that CA. And then basically through kind of mutual TLS, it will communicate and authenticate who the different services or endpoints are.
So Vault in this sense is playing the certificate authority. So it's managing.
You can. Console also has its own kind of brought in one, which is the like essentially the library from Vault. So if you don't want to run a full Vault cluster, you can do it directly within Console. If you have a different CA that you want to use, you could integrate that. Similarly to Boundary, for example, on the, I don't want to click back too far, but let's see if I can go back. So on this workflow here, basically when you start talking about like, hey, you've already authorized, so now you can see these different hosts and services. Well, now I want to connect to a database. Well, right now, the way that Boundary like essentially integrates with Vault is that Vault would do the dynamic kind of just-in-time credentials for that database.
Mm.
However, if you want to integrate with a different kind of secret store or whatever, you could also do that. So the idea is that like Boundary won't do this secret issuance. It will integrate with Vault. But the connectivity part of it, the proxying and whatnot, that's where Boundary is handling that. So if
Mm.
we go back to, sorry about all the slides, but if we go back to this kind of piece, really the idea around like machine authentication and authorization, that falls heavily into the Vault camp, and this is what we built Vault to do. It's a secrets management product and it's a data protection product. Then when we start to talk about like how things are accessing and how we manage that, we didn't want to build that into the Vault product, solely into the Vault product, because then, what people might be using Boundary or might be using Console for, they would be downloading it and having this whole other area of the product that aren't being used. So really the idea around Boundary is we can build its own ecosystem. We can build its own open source community to have its own integrations. So that again, like we've always kind of had this perspective of we don't want to require you to replace your software. We want to integrate with it. If you want to use, other HashiCorp products, that's great. And we have native integrations and those better together stories are really powerful, but we also want to give the option to users and customers to really kind of bring their own existing tooling in.
Okay. So another thing that is somehow on the back of my mind while you were in the beginning of your presenting in the beginning, you said at one point, if I remember correctly, that some of your customers are having a kind of challenges with respect to using the HashiCorp, the Vault, if I remember correctly. So that was in with respect to the Vault, and then somehow you jump into forward saying that we created the HashiCorp Cloud offering, so that you can use this from the cloud environments. So I'm wondering, from the one side, how did you identify, or did you identify what were the challenges that people were having with respect to, is it like usability challenges? Is it because their mental models are not quite there with the cloud native ecosystem? And how then it differs, or how did you implement this into the HashiCorp cloud offerings? How does this actually solve those issues, those challenges?
Sure. Yeah. So the feedback we've gotten has been kind of extensive across both enterprise customers, open source users, and in between. A lot of it is based around running Vault at scale is complex. It requires a lot of operational expertise, and a lot of it is really around the idea of getting people from day zero to day end and having them be successful. And part of what we set out to build the cloud platform for, or specifically HCP Vault, is really that idea of like removing the complexity of like installing, getting up and running, getting to the point where they can request a secret. Like that part is it's the expertise in order to get good at that becomes a lot different than I'm a developer and I just need a secret, or I just need to access this database. So part of it is really kind of reducing the overhead and the burden around getting that running, so that basically, hey, I want a Vault cluster. I know I want this stuff and I want the output of it. I don't want to run it. And we're starting to see that too at scale with companies, in that like, hey, we're supporting, thousands of developers. We've never done this before. You guys have. Can we leverage your expertise in how you would recommend us doing this? And rather than, us going in and necessarily like, setting up these kind of different versions maybe as a one-off for each customer, we thought, what if we abstract this complexity away and create a way for them to do this as an ad hoc, like as they need it, they can just have it.
Yeah, so you're doing this kind of transparent then to the developer. Okay, so but means that then I have like to use your services into the cloud, and this is of course for those clients into the cloud. And they can build also that on premises. So would you be able to do this kind of expertise, that what you have integrated and providing this as a kind of as a service, without going through this the different steps that you have just said before?
So that's a roadmap item. It's definitely something that we want to do. Part of what the cloud gives us a little bit of flexibility on is that we can deliver pretty quickly. Whereas on the kind of the on-prem or the self-managed world, we have to be a little bit more cognizant of how much we can deploy, how frequently we can deploy. But yeah, the idea is that we can definitely. We want to get to that point is the short answer. Yeah.
Thanks. Cool. Thank you
Great.
very much.
Thank you for the information and the insights.
You bet.
Thank you for
Thanks
your time.
Yeah.
And see you next time.
All right. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye.